What's going on, everyone? So today, as you can see up here, we have an imperfecto, right? And this is sort of coming after we learn el pretérito, or the preterite, and we have here el imperfecto, which is just in English the imperfect. So the imperfect tense. And so what is it? That's what we want to look at today. We want to look at what is it, and we also want to look at how does it work, right? So how do we use this? And first and foremost, like I said, I just mentioned el pretérito as well. Both el pretérito and el imperfecto, or the preterite and the imperfect, are both past tenses, right? So this is another past tense. And so you have to distinguish between, or differentiate between the use of the preterite and the use of the imperfect in Spanish. And so just a little bit of a, well, let's just write preterite up here, right? And so when we do the preterite, as you guys have already learned, it's really what we call, sort of generalizing, right, a one-time event. Now, that doesn't mean that if you've done something more than once, you don't use the preterite, but I just use that to sort of generalize, right? And so with the preterite, it's more of a, it's non-habitual, right? And so let's just put it that way. Whereas, and now since we're done with that, I'm going to draw a little X to it. So we're done with that for now. We got, as you guys already know, we already worked on the preterite for quite some time. So el imperfecto is also a past tense, right? But instead of it being one time or non-habitual, it's the exact opposite. It's actually habitual, right? And so that means something that you've done continuously over a period of time, in the past, of course. And so when you want to refer to that in Spanish, like you used to play soccer, or you used to go to the beach all the time, things like that, that's when we use the imperfect. And so today is just going to be a bit of an intro to the imperfect. And as I said, we looked at what it is. As I said, it's a past tense, implying that you did something habitually in the past. And we're going to take a look at how does it work, right? And so how do we form it? How do we use it, in a sense, right? And so this is a really fun tense for you all as you learn this, because as I've written here, there's only 3 irregulars, and that's pretty uncommon. You guys are used to learning a new grammar, and then me saying like, okay, so these are the regular ones. These are the ones that tweak in the stem, et cetera, and then, oh yeah, you have a whole host of irregulars. And so that's actually not the case for the imperfect, which is kind of cool. So like I said, there's 3 irregulars, and we'll look at those in a second too. And then over here, I've just given some examples. Of course, hablar is just a traditionally regular verb, right? But what I wanted to do here was look at what in the preterite and other tenses are either stem changers or irregular, for that matter, and show you, sort of case in point, how the imperfect, as I said, only has 3 irregulars. If it is not ir, ser, or ver, it is a regular verb in the imperfect. And I know that's going to take some time to sink in, but trust me, that's the case. So let's look at how it works, right? Just like with pretty much, all the other verbs, all the other conjugations you've learned in a regular, when they're regular, right? It's a pretty simple pattern, right? You drop the AR, ER, and IR. In effect, you drop the ending, right? And so once you do that, you then add, as it says here, the appropriate conjugations to agree, of course, with the subject. And so not going to deviate from that with the imperfect. So, and again, just to reiterate, it will do that for all verbs except for these irregulars. And so it's pretty nice, right? Pretty helpful. So, and so here we go. So we have, that's not an accent. That's just something that was written on the board beforehand. So we have ARs, and then you have ERs and IRs. So ERs and IRs are going to take the same ending, same conjugations, and then ARs, of course, as they normally tend to do, they're going to have their own set of endings, right? Of course, there's cases where that's not how it works, like the future and the conditional, but thus far, you guys have seen AR in its own category, and then on occasion, ER and IR sort of get grouped together. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. So let's take a look at the endings. And so remember, you drop the AR, the ER, or the IR, and then you add the appropriate conjugation to agree with the subject, of course. So we've got for ARs, again, you would have your stem, and then plus these endings, and then likewise, of course, right here, stem, plus those endings. And so you have ala, alas, ala, alamos, alais, and alan, right? And that's for the ARs. And then for the ERs and the IRs, you have, and notice all of these, before I get going on them, they all have accents on them, right? And so they all take an accent over that I. So you have ia, ias, ia, iomos, iais, and ian. And so these all take accents, whereas only this one has an accent. So make a note of that. And so that's the only one that will be accented here on the AR side. But the ERs and IRs, as you can see, they all have accents. And so again, just to sort of reiterate here, you drop the AR, the ER, and the IR, right? And then you add these appropriate conjugations. And so the other question is like, well, okay, like, so what am I saying when I use the imperfect tense? Like, how does that translate into English? And so that's why I wrote this up here actually in the title, near the title. It really translates to used to or was. So, and when we talk about the different ways to use preterite with the imperfect or the imperfect together, like in terms of something going on simultaneously in the past, that's where you'll see that translation. Or of course, with the past progressive, which is a past version of the present progressive. So when I was studying, cuando yo estaba estudiando, mi amigo escuchaba música. So mientras estaba escuchando música, mi amigo estaba estudiando, for example, right? And so like, while I was doing something, someone else was doing something else, right? And so that's what we look at as like simultaneous events going on in the past. But we'll get to that when we look at preterite verse imperfect. So today is just for the imperfect. So, but again, in terms of translation, it is used to, like I used to study Spanish, or I used to go to the beach every weekend. But again, in that now you don't, for example. And so used to and then was. So those are really your two translations when you talk about the English. And we'll make, you'll be able to see that a bit clearer when we look at some examples here in a minute. But in terms of conjugation examples, I just want to run through these, and then, like I said, I want to look at the three irregulars, and then we can look at some sentences, and then you'll see really what I'm talking about when it comes to this, these translations. So hablar su, right? So we have hablar su. So again, we drop the ending, so we drop the AR, right? And then we add the appropriate conjugation. And so since tu, and we have hablar, which is an AR verb, and we have tu, so we want, right? And I'll just write it right here for you guys. So we've got hablabas, right? And so that's how that works. So we attach that to the stem. Pedir, now pedir in the preterite, as you guys already know, IR verb, stem changer. So it gets a stem changer in the present indicative. So it's a stem changer in the third person singular and plural in the preterite. But we don't care about that now because one, we're on the imperfect, and two, again, the only changes that go on with the imperfect are these three right here. So pedir in the imperfect, el imperfecto, is totally regular, right? And we have yo, it was pedir. So that was an IR verb, and so we're going to put this ending on there. So we have pedia. So like used to ask for example. I used to ask for example. I said again, irregular verb in the preterite, right? It's an irregular jo in the present tense. So it's got its little tweaks in other tenses. But again, it's not ir ser ed, so we don't care, right? So we drop the ending, we drop the ER, right? It's an ER verb, and we want it for nosotros, right? And so we write, I'm going to write it right here, hacíamos, right? Nosotros form of the imperfect right here with an ER verb, so you get hacíamos, we used to do, or we used to make, is how you could translate that. And then we have poder, again, an irregular in the preterite, but it's in the imperfect. It's not ir ser ed, so we don't really care. So let's have a look. Drop the ER, right? And then we add our endings here, and so we want, in this case we have vosotros, so we want iais, right? And then again, we got to make sure we have the accent, and then this one gets a dot, of course. So we have podíais, right? And so we hit that accent over the I. And again, the last example here is está. You guys are used to this being irregular a lot, right? And so, at least in the case of the present tense and the preterite tense, it's irregular. So, and that's what we've looked at so far. So now we're in the Imperfecto. It is not ir, ser, ver. I know I've said that enough, but I'll keep saying it anyways, right? And we have ellos, and so it's está, so it's an AR verb, and we have ellos, so we want to add estaban, right? And so it becomes estaban. And that will make up one of the two components of the past progressive, which is just the present progressive, which you've already learned in the past, right? And that's it. And so instead of saying estoy comiendo, right, which is just saying I am eating, instead of saying I am eating, you would then say I was eating, right? And so that would just be estar in the imperfect, right, paired with the gerund. So let's just use that same example. So I'm going to put yo just so we're clear. Yo estaba comiendo. So this one is saying I am eating, and this one is saying I was eating. That's really what you're doing there. And the reason I wrote yo here, this isn't necessary, as you know, because of estoy. But the reason I did that here is if you notice, the yo form of the first person singular and the third person singular is the same ending, and same case for here and here. So if there's any level of ambiguity, right, if it's unclear, then you just put the subject pronoun in there, or the subject if it's subject. So, but yo, of course, as we know, is a subject pronoun. So if you need to do that, by all means, do that. But yeah, so again, kind of playing off of this, right? I showed you guys also how to do the past progressive. So, and again, you can, if you want to use the past progressive in the same way you use the present progressive, but of course, just talking in the past, estar must be in the imperfect tense. Now, I will say that you will hear native speakers use it in the preterite, but grammatically speaking, right, in terms of grammar, it's grammatically correct to use the imperfect, right? I'm certainly not here to run around correcting everybody. I'm just responsible for teaching you guys what the grammar book says when it comes to things like this. So that's the case. So let's take a look at the three irregulars that have been sitting over here the whole time, right? So we have the verb ir, as you know, is to go, ser, which means to be, and then ver, which means to see, right? Those are the only irregulars in the imperfect, which is kind of nice, right? It's like you get to relax and not, freak out over all the irregulars you got to memorize. So you get three here, that's it, right? And so with the verb ir, you have, again, its set of conjugations, ser, its set of conjugations, and ver, of course, with its set of conjugations. So let's have a look at them. So we've got iba, ibas, iba, íbamos, notice that accent, right? Íbamos, ibais, iban, right? And so moving over to ser, right, which means to be, you have era, eras, era. Let's put an accent there. Éramos, erais, and eran, right? And so again, notice there's an accent over that E. And let's move over to here. So this is going to be pronounced like this in English. So beia, right? So beia, that's how you would pronounce that. And then of course you have beías, beía, beíamos, beíais, and beía, right? And so just notice where that accent is. And so that's, hopefully this was helpful, at least to remind you of how to do the first one. And then if you get that one, you can sort of figure out the other ones. And so, yeah, so those are your three irregulars. Ir, ser, y ver. I think I've said that enough already. But yeah, so let's have a look at some examples and a few sentences that we'll use as examples so we can see it sort of in the sentence. So let's check that out. All right, so here we go. We've got some examples. Of course, there's many more we could use, but I tried to use an irregular, Again, another irregular, and well, of course, the rest are, as you know, regular, but some of these in other tenses are a little odd. So they're either irregular or they do an I to Y or just different changes. So I thought I'd put them in there just to reiterate that they really are, in fact, pretty normal, pretty regular. So let's start here with we have two of the three, the other one being bad, but we'll put ir instead up here. So again, let's have a look at number one. So we have yo siempre. And notice we use siempre, which means always, right? That's definitely going to imply some level or something that has been habitual, right, in the past. And so, yo siempre, I always. Used to go is really what your translation will be. So I always used to go a la playa todos los sábados. So I always used to go to the beach every Saturday, right? So that's what you're saying. So again, ir. The subject is yo, right? So our conjugation will be iba. So yo siempre iba a la playa todos los sábados. All right, let's move on to number two. We got two blanks here, right? Just for some little bonus here, right? And so anyways, we have cuando, and then I put the subject here, nosotros. I want to make sure it fit in the camera, I guess you could say. So cuando, when, right? And this is talking about when I was a child, right? So that always, when we talk about that, say when I was a child or when I was young or whatever, we will use the imperfect because we're implying to something that was habitual in the past in terms of like being a child or being young. So cuando nosotros éramos, right? Because we want nosotros for ser, another irregular. Cuando nosotros éramos niños, right? So let's make that grammatically correct. So niños, right? Let's make that work. Nosotros, we used to play soccer a lot, right? And so jugar, again, we drop the AR, and then it's an AR verse, and we add the ending for nosotros, so that would be habamos, right? And I'm going to write it so you can actually read it. So that would be jugábamos. Right? And that's an A. So nosotros jugábamos al fútbol todos los días. Cuando nosotros éramos niños, nosotros jugábamos al fútbol mucho. Again, implying habitual activity in the past. So here's another good one, number three. Mientras means while, right? So we're creating this simultaneous scenario in the past in number three. So while he was listening to music, right? His friend was making coffee, right? Kind of random, but whatever, right? So mientras él estaba, right? Because we want estar in the imperfect tense. Mientras él estaba escuchando música, su amigo hacía café, right? We drop the ER and we add our appropriate conjugation. Hacer being an ER verb, and the subject being su amigo, so that's why we get hacía, right? And again, just to remind you all, estaba escuchando is a use of the past perfect, right? So you have while he was listening, so you have a number of things going on. We're using the imperfect, of course. We're talking about something simultaneously going on in the past, which is imperfect with imperfect, right? Because they're not interrupting one another. They're just going on simultaneously in the past. And so we have here estaba escuchando, right? Notice it's escuchando because it's the infinitive is escuchar. So we add ando for the AR for that. So, and then we have hacía, of course, at the end. And so while he was listening to music, his friend was making coffee. And notice that translation, right? And that's why I kept that up here. And so, número cuatro, todos los lunes, every Monday, again, setting up something that's habitual. Todos los lunes, ellos, right? And we have asistir, ellos, so it's asistían, right? Let's make that an accent. So, ellos asistían a la clase de español. So, every Monday, todos los lunes, they attended Spanish class. So, todos los lunes, ellos asistían, right, IAN, a la clase de español. And the last one here, tú siempre. So again, we've got always down here, right? Again, habitual. Tú siempre leer el periódico por la mañana. So you always read, or always used to read, right? That's the better translation. So you always used to read el periódico, the newspaper, in the morning, right? And so leer, we drop the ER, we add our appropriate conjugation for tú, so we have leías. Tú siempre leías el periódico por la mañana. So here's 5 pretty good examples that I think will help you better understand how to use the imperfect in sentences and also how to translate them. So hopefully that was helpful for you guys.